Today is September 9th, 2020. We are meeting via GoToMeeting, and we will start with the first item, the roll call.
Bernesci, Devisio,
Present.
Remington, Rogan,
Here.
Smith.
Present. All right, we are down 2 members this evening. We move on to item number 2, public comments on any items not listed on the agenda. Hearing none, I shall move on to the approval of the minutes of our last meeting, August 12th, 2020, as distributed by Georgie. Georgie, thank you as always for being so diligent with our minutes.
You're welcome.
I'll accept a motion to approve these minutes as written.
I'll make a motion to approve them. Jean.
Thank
I
you.
will second that motion.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes of our last meeting have been approved. We move on to item number 4, new business. Item 4A, library resource room, Tom Potter.
Yes, and thank you, Chairman. I asked Tom Potter if he'd join us tonight and give us a sense of all the things they have available there in the resource room and how he can help folks who are looking to research their properties. So, Tom, I show that your microphone's muted, but go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad to give you any information you need, and let me know if you have any questions. I just thought of something else, and I'm going to make a little note here. It's the history room, and Chris, you've been there many times, right?
I have.
I'm talking to the same Chris, right?
That's right, that's right. Fox West Theater,
So,
many hours of microfiche. I'll sing your praises after you.
No, you don't have to do that. Anyway, so it's called the History Room, and first of all, anybody from the public, you don't have to have a library card. Anybody from anywhere can use the History Room. You just have to make an appointment. Probably the first thing, I know you're talking about housing or information about properties for the most part. And big one there is the survey of the Cortisone district. It was done around 2002, I think. And you probably are all familiar with that, and I think the city has a copy. It's a series of folders, binders that has copious information about every property in the core zone. The only problem with it that I find is the core zone is a small part of Trinidad. And for example, it doesn't include my neighborhood, which is up Colorado Avenue, the northwest side of town, which has a lot of interesting properties. Unfortunately, nobody did a survey of those, so I think someday maybe we'll get some kind of grant for somebody to survey those properties in the same way that was done before. So that's first thing, and that's the first place I look is your property in that core zone. It's basically downtown plus the south side up to about through about 3rd Avenue. If you're lucky enough to live there, you're in luck. Anyway, so that's number 1. Number 2 is microfilm. And I'll just go through everything that's available. Some of it has nothing to do with properties, but newspapers from about 1875 on, local newspapers, coroner reports, records from the Catholic Church, burial records, baptism records, etc. And this would come in handy if, like, let's say your house was owned by a certain person in 1885 or something. You you can look up what that family was like and who was in it, I guess. And then also census records, which could be handy. You could, I guess, backtrack that to addresses. Then we have a lot of files mostly on historic figures or things that happened in Trinidad. Not very well organized at this point. We're working on a database to get everything so that it's actually searchable. But that's going to be a long ways off. It's a very time process. So files, you might have some information on files, especially if the house was owned by a prominent citizen. And then probably the next best source other than the survey of the Cortisone district are the city directories. So one thing I always do, even if they get information from the Cortisone binders, is to go through the city directories. A lot of them have backward directories. In other words, you can look up an address. Look up an address and find out who lived there. And there's, only a few of those directories where that's true. All the modern directories from 1990s on have that capability. You can, I don't know if you know it or not, but you can come into the library, look in a current directory and look up an address, and it'll tell you who lives there. Kind of interesting. But you can do that for like 1922, I think, let's say. I'm not sure if that data is correct, but, and then from there, let's say you find somebody that owned that property, you can go, once you get that name, you can go back in the directories and confirm how, when that address really started happening for that person. So it's a way of doing a little bit of painstaking research on a property. That's about all I can think of. And if you have any questions, we have a lot of books. Of course, that's probably going to be a needle in a haystack trying to find information that's in a book that has something to do with a local property. But there could be things like when floods happened, I don't know, events that might have had something to do with architecture. Also in the newspapers, I mentioned the newspapers, and you would say, well, why is that pertinent? Back in the old days, if a house was built, especially a house built by somebody that's fairly prominent, there would be an article about it, who the architect was, who the family, something about the family that's going to be living there, who built it, the contractor. So a lot of interesting information. You have to have a year for that, or even maybe a year and a month to locate that kind of information. But I've run across things like that.
You said
any questions?
You said the houses all have the records of who owned them. Do all of the businesses down in that area show who was running the businesses at the time as well?
Yeah. In other words, you can, yes, definitely. So if you go into, let's say, the 1910 city directory, look up Hive or some store, it will tell you who the owner was, who the president, if it has a president, who the, and also individuals. If you can find an individual listing, it will tell you, even if it's like a clerk that lived or that worked at a Jameson's or some other store. If you know who that person was, that was the clerk, and you find them in a directory, it'll say he was a clerk at Jameson's. So, a lot of it is hit and miss or blind luck, but you can find a lot of information from those directories. And definitely businesses. There is a business directory, and also businesses are listed in the residential directory.
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much for all of your work. As one who has experienced the history room at the library, And, you know, I put in a few hours just digging through the microfiche and seeing headlines from the Chronicle News, because if it's in the Chronicle, it happened, right? And, like, on this day, John Philip Sousa was on his way to the Fox West Theater, and his train derailed between here and Walsenburg. And I'm glad to say I captured all those images long ago, and that actually appeared on the Fox West Theater's Facebook page today as a memory, because it happened on this day. We have such a rich history. I would encourage anybody to go to the history room. I have two quick questions for you. Well, one of them a little more complicated. Another one I think I have an answer to. The first one, can you describe any collaboration between the history room and the History Museum and or the Mitchell Museum? Not that there should be. I just kind of want to know the history of collaboration about history.
No real direct collaboration other than, you know, I had a good rapport with Kirby when she was at the History Museum. I don't know who's there now. But not really. Basically, they would send people to me. So in other words, people would come to the History Museum and want information about a family. They don't really have a lot. And so they pretty regularly send people to me for that. The Mitchell Museum, no. I mean, I know Allison, and we've talked about some kind of collaboration, but only very briefly, and I'm not even sure what that would look like. But it would be an interesting thing, yeah.
Yeah, just to know, because there's a lot of folks working on the same team when it comes to the history of Trinidad. So just to understand what has happened before we think about what could. My other question is in the weeds, but it does relate to, well, it came up as the Fox West Theater continues its search for big piles of money, and we're talking about period of significance. The Corazon de Trinidad Historic District is, the Fox West Theater is a contributing structure to that historic district. What is the period of significance identified for that historic district? The answer I think I have, and all we can find in the documentation is, quote, 19th century, end quote. If you or Georgie, if anybody can shed any light on that, it would be super helpful.
Well, I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Georgie.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I've got a little bit of information on that. You know, originally when the boundary of the district was drawn, it was, I can't remember the association that did it. I believe Willie Loudon was involved in it, and a number of the old timers. When they did the 2001 survey, the historians said that they really kind of disagreed with the boundary, how it was laid out, that there were things that were left out. Some of the buildings on Pine Street, you know, which really was part of the downtown area before the interstate bisected it. Some of those areas were left out of it. But there was some confusion as to the period of significance, and I think the National Park Service, in reviewing it down the line, determined it was up from the 1860s, I believe it was, up to 1924. The historians suggest that that should be revised, maybe up to 1939, because there was still significant growth of Trinidad through the 30s. It was after the 40s and the wartime and things that the economy started to dwindle and the heyday of coal was past. So those are things, you know, that's a possibility that the commission may want to do sometime down the line, is resurvey the historic district. And maybe
What would that take? Would we commission that and hire somebody to do it, or?
Yes, people who really know what they're doing. the people who did the 2001 survey, Front Range Research Associates, that's Tom and Lori Simons. And Tom, we currently have them under contract. They're preparing a survey plan for the commission where they're going to taking a look at the entire town and kind of look for areas where there's significant numbers of historic homes and things of that nature, and they're going to prioritize how we should go about surveying future surveys, like the Colorado Avenue area. You know, they may see that as a real priority, survey in those areas. So that's what we're kind of doing right now to kind of get started with but one of our tasks as a certified local government is to inventory the historic resources in the community. So that's something that'll be an ongoing process. We did get a $25,000 grant to do this survey plan. So that's our first step.
I remember I gave some input to that.
Yeah.
It was asking for suggestions on where would be interesting places. And I can't remember what I said, but I remember giving some.
Right, and you know, pre-COVID, we had hoped to kind of start out with a community meeting and bring people in and get their ideas too as to where they would like to see surveys done and what they think is important. But so we're doing the best we can right now.
Of course. And here's where the rubber meets the road, as it were. The Fox West Theater is in that historic district, and the fuzzy edge of the period of significance, that is the 20th century edge, is very important to the period of significance that the Fox West Theater will pursue. The building looked vastly different on its storefront and on its Main Street frontage in 1921, 29, 33. And when we found, all we could find was 19th century, and that made us feel like we were we were exempt from having to figure this out. We surely are not. So I know towards current grant applications, this period of significance is critical, and we need the community, we need this body and the city to be on board, right? As we apply for large amounts of money to fix up the building. And you know, between 21, 29, and 33, I bet you can guess what the biggest change to the Main Street look of it was, and that would be the marquee. And there was feelings that the marquee is far from original to the early 20th century look of the Opera House, and new feelings say that the marquee is essential, and if a large ticket donor is willing, we need to keep it. So again, where the rubber meets the road as far as the period of significance for the Corazon de Trinidad Historic District. I'm glad we've got folks in tow that are creating a plan for creating more assessment, and I think we need to deal with this. I don't know if they can help us with that.
I'll have to go back to the summary book of the 2001 survey is where I found that statement about the period of significance. I'll have to dig it out and find it again, and I'll let you know exactly. I'm pretty sure it was like 1924, pre-1924, but I'll check it out.
Cool. I would really appreciate it. You can see the dilemma in there's folks' aesthetic opinions about whether or not the marquee looks cool, and that is sometimes in conflict with best historic preservation practice. So given that it's a contributing structure in this district, it'd be cool to just lean on that, right? So thank you, Georgie. I appreciate that.
Okay. I'll look that up for you.
Could I give a real quick comment? As I go through that, the Cortisone binders, it seems to me it's less based on date than place. In other words, in that boundary, every building is in there. Doesn't matter if it's a shack or metal building, it's in there. That's one comment. And as you know, buildings that are built are going to be history 50 years from now. And I wouldn't, well, I know your historic preservation kind of implies buildings, but it's same thing with the history room. It's really important to work with current history, because that becomes, if we do a good job of recording current history, then it's the history of 100 years from now will be blessed with that. And
that's right. That's right.
The problem with my history room is we're not keeping up with what's going on now. I don't have a file very big that's on the marijuana industry. I don't, and it's slipping by as we speak, and I just don't have the resources or the time to keep up with it. You know, things are changing. History includes now, I guess is my point.
I agree. Thank you. And thank you, too, for the understanding about the Cortisone de Trinidad Historic District, which I'm hearing inside of your description of it that it is based on geographic region and not on a time period. That is, all of the buildings within these lines that we have drawn, and we thought a lot about these lines, but everything in here is part of this district. That makes cases for periods of significance for individual buildings a different task, right?
Yes.
So, thank you again. And as far as the gathering of historic info about Trinidad, present tense, past, recent past tense, I think you're very right, and I wondered how collaboration might work, right? I'm not sure about that. Does the Trinidad Historical Society, do they have regular interactions with you, Tom?
Not really. To a certain extent. And for starters, their work is what produced a lot of the materials in the history room. So it's just to be diplomatic, and I wasn't around when this was happening, but there were some issues between the Historical Society and the library over a certain amount of time. I don't know details, but I know there was a lot of bruising going on, a lot of hard feelings, distrust. So, and I think that still is true. The Historical Society is, I don't know, they have a history with the history room, I guess you'd call it, because they produced a lot of it. They apparently donated it or felt that it would be a good play, that the library would be a good depository, and then because of library administrations handling it in different ways as directors came and went, there was some hard feelings. So, but I do have contact with a few of the prominent members, and we're on good terms. Just me personally with them. Whether they agree with what's going on in the history room, I don't know. I hope they do, and they're an important, really should be an important part of the whole picture. As the Historic Society on its own. I mean, they should have I would think they would have an input on this too. Theirs is, basically word of mouth memory that these people know a lot about the history, and it's just right off the top of their heads. It's kind of scary. And if we can somehow reap that information, it'd be wonderful.
Have you ever heard any talk of an oral history project?
Yes, we have one. Again, as technically we have an oral history program. Had probably 2 recordings so far. The Kirby Stokes had one going at the History Museum, and I think she did a number of recordings. I'm not sure, but I think that's an important one, not only for historic society people, but just for all kinds of people in Trinidad. It's an interesting resource. Difficult to or I guess catalog, in other words, but very interesting information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for letting me pick your brain.
I was going to ask you, Tom, if there's if you have the ability to record those interviews then at the resource room, so people can just contact you directly.
Yeah. In fact, I've had a ongoing thing on Thursdays. Of course, with COVID, it hasn't been going on, but Thursday afternoons from 3 to 4 or something like that. People are welcome to come in and do an oral history. Nobody's ever taken me up on it. So, but I've gone to, for one thing, one of the recordings I have is with Phyllis Kilgrove that works here, just telling us about what it was like living in coal camps and having her parents or her father work in the mines, and so I'm definitely willing to do it, and my problem is time and resources, and nice if we had some graduate student that decided to take on that task. It'd be really great. Go to the legacy, go to the nursing home, to start recording people.
Well, thank you. I think oral history is a very, very rich project that we could. I'm glad that you've been doing that. I'm sorry no one has ever taken you up on it. And if a dozen people did this coming week, I would imagine it would overwhelm your already full schedule. So it is something that we had talked about on this commission was, and of course pre-COVID, was a historic preservation festival of sorts, a one-day conference, get a few speakers, put on a lunch, and really have Trinidad recognize itself for its history. And I think some sort of event like that needs to heal some, it just needs to have everybody understand we're all playing on the same team here.
And maybe oral histories can be part of that. Maybe they can set it up so that people could provide some oral histories for Tom at that festival.
Sure. Again, like I'm interim director now, Mallory just left. We're trying to hire somebody new. It would be really difficult right now if you said, well, let's do it tomorrow. But
Right.
when I'm back to my usual job, especially with COVID, because COVID has kind of slowed the library down quite a bit, and we have a lot of time to do other things. So, and then, of course, figuring out how to do it in a safe way. But I'm sure we could come up with something. Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of on hold until COVID is a thing of the past, or it's much safer to gather, I guess.
Yeah, I hope somebody's recording the history of the COVID epidemic in Trinidad. It's in the newspapers, etc. But that'd be an interesting project.
Do any of the other commissioners have questions for Tom or need clarification of anything?
I was going to ask if the history room is open now during this COVID period.
Yeah, it's open. You just have to make an appointment. Basically,
Okay.
you get an hour. So there's a couple of ways of using the history room. One is just come in. Another is mail a request. In other words, I need information on a person, a building, or whatever. And the third one is to let's see, what was I going to say? So you can come in. You can email a request, and then I can do the research for you. It's $15 an hour for a private citizen, and usually I can do anything that we do have in 1 hour, unless it's something really extreme like Chris Smith wanting everything in the world that ever happened to the Fox Theater, and he did that himself. So he spent hours and hours in there just combing through the newspapers.
We haven't even started. I've got a list of dates going, Tom. Where do you see me next?
Okay. But basically, you get one. If you do come in, you get 1 hour, and you just need to make an appointment. And I'm in there
Okay.
to help you find stuff.
Okay.
Probably the best way though is just email me, or even just email the library and say, do you have any information on this? And then I can let you know.
Right. Well, I'm interested in doing an ownership search of a house in Corazon. I want to know all the owners over time.
Yeah, that's again doable with the city directory sometimes. Sometimes the county is supposed to have that information, whether they do or not. I've had mixed results on that when I send people to the county. But
It's hard to search the county records. I've tried that.
yeah,
The
unfortunately.
other thing, of course, is Trinidad Abstract has all the records, but they charge $30 an hour.
Oh, hey, maybe I should up my fee.
Okay.
All that money goes to the library too, by the way.
Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with us tonight, and hopefully there's, things that we do will be able to benefit you, and we can kind of work collaboratively.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Yeah, Tom, thank you again for all your work, and feel free to spread the word wherever there is bad blood between historic organizations that are dedicated to the preservation and recognition of Trinidad's history. Let them know that this Historic Preservation Commission is excited to get everybody working together, and that might look new and different, but we were hoping to facilitate those conversations, and COVID threw us for a loop. But yeah, because this place is so cool. You know it.
Yeah.
It is.
All right, is that all you need from me? If so, I can leave, but if there are questions, let me know.
It sounds like we're good. Thank you again, Tom.
Consider we're good. Okay. Okay, good luck. Keep in touch.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep, take care. Georgie, thank you for inviting Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Georgie.
you're welcome. I'd like to spend
Excellent.
all my days over in that resource room or history room. I
I have like a million questions, but they were very like specific. So I'm like, I'll just go bug him myself.
he is a great
Right.
resource.
In my experience, if you can walk in with a date, I mean, as specific as possible, it often yields immediate results. So, hey, we're going to move on to item 4B, and that's Commissioner Delisio.
Okay, well, I attended about 6 sessions of the National NAPC Forum, Preservation Commission Forum, and it was all online. And the 2 that I really had an effect on me was the one about the property taxes by this opening plenary speaker, Joe Minicozy, which incited me to look up some research on how cities have property tax discrepancies remaining from the 17th century tax codes, and we should try to get our county tax staff to give a report. The other session I went to was City of Plano, and it has a very thorough 400-page document and multiple sessions with meetings from different organizations and collaborations from Plano, Texas, and they have a 400-page historical preservation plan, which I put the website. It's in the agenda, the plano.gov, and it's an amazing document which even studies 1100 BC, how Plano had prehistoric. And the main idea is that maybe we could work on this as part of our big book that we've been talking about and our research and our putting together something for the public to view. So if you have time to look at that, like I said, it's quite elaborate, but they did a lot of community meetings and they probably paid a lot of money to get this document put together. But I thought it was really worth sharing with you. And the other thing I thought was very well done as part of our minutes was the city-owned properties, and that we could maybe landmark some more by prioritizing the earlier 1886 to 1925 buildings. There's about 10. And from 1926 to 1970, I figured out there was about another 10. So there's 20 buildings that Tom Birch put together we asked him last meeting to put together the city-owned properties. So I'm really thinking we should use some of that money we had to designate and landmark. I don't know if we have any more consulting money like we did with the Carnegie Library. So those are my 3 things that I want to talk about. And hopefully you can have time to look at that City of Plano website and just, they couldn't send us the document because it was over 400 pages, but it's all on their website. And it's a very well put together plan and process, as well as graphically designed by decades, and it would be a really long-term project that we might want to use with that 2001 survey. And thank you, Georgie, for putting that survey online, because that was, or on her website, because I'd never had seen that. It was a really well done, well researched, the 2001 survey. So that's all I have to say. I just want to do the 3 things: is look at the property tax revenues and see how their property taxes are determined. Second thing is to look at that Plano, so that we could start thinking about a long-range plan and a model preservation plan. And the third thing is to landmark some more of the buildings that Tom Birch had requested. And one of them is the Kit Carson bandstand, and I don't know why. And that's one of our interest areas too. So thank you for listening, and on with the next item, I guess.
Hey, well, thank you. There's a whole lot of really good information. Georgie, thanks too for drawing attention to the Plano plan and embedding that link in the agenda. I actually had a chance to look at it before, and what really strikes me, I think there's a lot of similarities between Plano, Texas and Trinidad, Colorado. And what really strikes me is they know, just like we know, a landmark procedure is awesome and is the function of this commission. And what they did was a step before landmarking. They just said, you know what, this is a potential heritage resource, and if the property owner wants to landmark it, well, here's a list of everything that we think is a potential heritage resource. And I can imagine this took a lot of, excuse me, I can imagine this took a lot of community involvement, because if you look at these potential heritage resources, these can be as invasive as Google Street View. It's a picture of someone's house, and they really didn't opt in any way, but this city body has identified it as part of a preservation plan. Now, I can understand where we have such structures as well. And it's in the name of historic preservation that we say, hey, here's the top 15 things that we think the property owner or somebody should landmark, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give it that context, because we know our landmarking procedure, and we're going to work on getting folks to go through that. And this is a step before that. And I just wonder how they went about it, and more like the PR of it, right? This must have been a public relations situation. So I'm going to read more, and I would encourage everybody to. If it's cool, can we put it on the agenda for our next meeting to hear even, let people have a chance to give us their thoughts about it?
That's a good idea.
I sure will.
Cool. Imagining a post-COVID world, and a historic preservation commission hosted historic preservation festival one-day event, and it's got everybody involved. And well, shucks, I would definitely want to invite a couple folks from Plano. They obviously know what they're doing. I'm not sure we could really offer them anything except for the honor of speaking about what they did and how they did it. Boy, that would be really, really cool, huh?
Great idea.
That would be cool.
They spend a lot of time and money, and they really, I'd like to go there. We should try to visit and see what, I didn't even know it was a historical city until I heard this whole speech, and it was really well presented. And like I said, the website is just so thorough with the graphic design and in sequential order of how they, like you said, got their potential heritage resources going. I think you're right. We need to invite them here for our festival.
Yeah, and I just kind of wonder that, cemeteries, districts, individual properties, they really just started to draw their own, let's put this on this list, and let's put this on this list. Not to say anybody's about to knock down this building over here, but of everything we have, these are 15 that are not landmarked, but boy, they're worth your notice, right? So much so that Plano.gov is putting photos of individual privately owned properties on their website. There is something striking about that, right? And I think it would strike some people in not a positive way. So how they accomplished that, yeah, I'm fascinated.
No, I'm glad you looked at it. Thank you for taking the time.
Yes. I will look at it before the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to put it on the next meeting agenda. Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Hey, if it's cool, we'll move on to 4C. And this says, Ms. Clark reports on sessions of particular interest.
Yes, and I was hoping to kind of put together a detailed list, but I was explaining to Commissioner Delicio, it's been a crazy day today here in this office. So I was able to watch a number of the sessions live, but there were, I don't know how many there were lots of them. For the people who did go to it, they received a link so they could watch recorded copies or recorded versions of the sessions they missed. And so far I've watched about 14 of the sessions, and there were a lot of good ones. I have until October 1st to finish watching the rest of them. I hope to get through them all. But some of the ones that kind of stuck in my mind, there was one called "You Can't Paint That Purple," and basically it was discussions, and they had people from all over the country, different planning directors or preservation commissioners speaking, and it was all about the myths that people have about historic preservation, and if they landmark their property, the big bad guys are going to come down and be watching everything they do. And it was the myths about historic preservation and tips on how to talk with people and, dispel those myths. And it was really quite interesting, I thought. Another one that was, current for us is there was a session on Confederate monuments and controversial history. And they had a number of people from all over the country involved in this session. One of them was the woman that's in charge of, it's in Atlanta, and I guess it's called Monument Avenue in Atlanta, where they have this. It looked like it was about 5, 6, 7 blocks long. I don't know how long, of all these monuments to Confederate soldiers or generals. And they're all these different municipalities trying to figure out what they should do at this point. And something that really stuck out, a couple things they said that really stuck out in my mind was, they said monuments are not history, they represent history. And so the monument itself is not history. And that's something to just kind of keep in mind. And then people are especially people that are against taking down the Confederate monuments, say, but this is my heritage, I'm from the South, this is my heritage. And this one gentleman said that heritage omits and exaggerates, and history explains facts. And that just really impressed me. I thought about it for days and days and days, about heritage. They tell you how great their heritage was, but they leave out the bad aspects,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of interesting. And one of the professors at, I believe he was out of San Antonio, but he said that it all comes back to the context of why and when they were placed. Most of the Confederate monuments were placed during the time period shortly after when President Johnson signed civil rights legislation. And a number of cities erected these monuments to say, maybe you have some rights, but we're still in charge, so that was really the context in why they were put up. So it was interesting, and all the plans that different municipalities are making, some to leave up. One person suggested, maybe leaving up monuments, but bringing in other statues that tell the other side of that particular issue. I thought that was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting long discussion on Confederate monuments. And overall, I guess I have to say, all the information I get from historical organizations, national, they all seem to be very supportive of, taking down monuments that offend people. Where there's controversy, it's better to just maybe move them to a museum where you can explain more about what was the total picture of what was going on at that time period. Another session that I really enjoyed was called Design Review for Preservation Commissions. And it's pretty interesting to hear, all the commissions, their ordinances were written differently, so they have different ways of reviewing both applications for landmarking, and then especially alteration certificates. You know, when people want to make changes to their building, it's really quite interesting, all the span of ways in which different commissions handle those things. Another thing that was very interesting was a session, and it was just two people on this session. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Mark Rodman, but he used to be the Certified Local Government Coordinator for History Colorado, and so I interacted with him a lot when we first set up this commission. And he came down and did the first commission orientation for our Historic Preservation Commission. But he and another lady at History Colorado basically argued through these various points. They would show a building, and was this a good thing or a bad thing? Does this meet the Secretary of Interior standards or doesn't it? And well, you can argue things every different which way, so it's interesting, you know, there's no one right answer. Yeah, all commissions have, you know, and each member in a commission has different thoughts and feelings towards changes. So overall, I thought it was a fantastic opportunity to get to see all these various sessions. And I know that the National Organization of Preservation Commissioners, who put on this forum, every other year they do what they call the camp training, and usually it coincides with the Saving Places conference in Denver, but they do a day-long training session. So we'll keep a watch out for that, and maybe some of you will be able to attend that as well. And that's about all that I have prepared to say about sessions, but they were very good. And I did want to comment a little bit on the preservation plan. Most communities do prepare a preservation plan. It's one of the key things that we'll need to address too for our community, and look at the different. A preservation plan looks at the different contexts and different time periods of history, and kind of going back to what Tom Potter mentioned, you know, marijuana in Trinidad will be a context in the history one day of Trinidad, very much a context. So we will need to look at doing a preservation plan, and it will be something that we'll have to get a large grant to do, because it'll be another multi-thousand-dollar undertaking. So you can also look, you know, just type Google different preservation plans for different areas. You know, I've got tons of them from like Fort Collins, Aspen, Steamboat, all different places. You can look at what their preservation plans are like. So,
is there one, Georgie, that you feel like is most akin to Trinidad? Like, if there was, if you could pick any community's preservation plan and have Trinidad adopt it based on what you know and the needs of our community, is there one that comes to mind?
well, it really wouldn't be one that, you know, kind of maybe the outline would be similar in all of them, but a preservation plan is going to look at, you know, Trinidad specifically. What, you know, probably starting with, well, it'd probably start prior to man's existence here, but, you know, then the various native people that were here, the Santa Fe Trail, the influx, and it would go through, you know, the coal mining that was particular to this area, and so you can't just really adopt another one. You know, it's all preservation plan for your community.
I understand. I just wondered if there was a community that created a preservation plan in a way, and the final product was something that was beneficial to them, and the community is of similar size to us.
I'll go back and look through some of them and see. You know, it's been a couple of years now since I started collecting those. So I'll look and try and get an idea. That book that I gave you, that the Certified Local Government book that Erica Duback sent down for each of you,
Mm-hmm.
they talk about preservation plans in there as well. There's a little bit of information about the importance and some of the details of a preservation plan. So you might look at that real quick. That's very little brief summary information.
Georgie, as far as we're concerned, do we just kind of go through that and pick out the points that we want to focus on to then present to city council about doing a preservation plan? Or like, what are the steps that we would kind of need to do to get that ball rolling?
Well, I think it would need to be something pretty much like we're doing the survey plan. We didn't really take that to council. If council was paying for it, of course, we'd have to get money from them, but it would be more something like we'd apply for a grant to History Colorado. They quite regularly give grants out for preservation plans because they believe that's so important. It's kind of like the guiding document of preservation in your particular community. So we need to apply for a grant and get that going as well. And it would be something that would be prepared by a historian, people that are skilled in that, researching and understanding what goes into putting together a preservation plan.
Okay.
All right. If it's cool, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. And that is item number 5, unfinished business. There's a list of city-owned properties distributed alongside the agenda for this meeting. And we're going to do a quick rundown of them. Is that the plan, Georgie?
Well, yes. At our last meeting, I believe it was Commissioner Delicio that had asked Mike Valentine about city-owned buildings. And so I got the information. There are some city-owned buildings that I left out of here. They're just, like maintenance buildings, little sheds, basically. But these are the primary structures that the city owns. You can see some of them. The annex building next door to City Hall here, that was the original police station. 1886, there's a number of great buildings. So this is just a list I put together of city-owned buildings and their location and the dates that they show them being built. And one thing I guess I thought about putting this together, and I went back and I read every word of the ordinance again. The city owns Monument Lake Resort.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would have to ask, but I started thinking, I don't see why we could not landmark the resort up there.
I think we should landmark all 20 of those buildings, and that's why I was asking how much money we have left from that consulting firm that landmarked the Carnegie building. I think we should take it by the year and do the 1886 and go forward. Try to get the older ones landmarked first, because that Carnegie Library. I don't know if anybody got copies of that. That was quite a thorough landmarking. If you got a copy of that, it's about 30 pages. And it gives the history and the changes that happened to Carnegie Library. But I didn't realize there was older buildings, especially the golf course also. And there seems to be about 10 buildings that are up to 1924. And then after 24, there's about 10 more buildings that are on this list if you go by chronological age. I'd just like to make a motion that we try to landmark all of them. because it's quite the.
Yes, I am very. When I saw this list, I did wonder why we don't. Well, excluding a few things, I'd say from 1940 onward, just to focus our energies. That would give us City Hall Annex. The library's already done. The Kit Carson Bandstand, the second fire station, the Children's Museum, the Waterworks. You know, and to do a dozen of them and to hold all applications, because it is the city and because we are commissioned by the city, and do them all at once and make news as we do so. Has any community ever, you know?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we could, partner with the Chronicle News to really advertise, because, especially like where the Children's Museum, if we got that one, and then maybe it could spread more throughout our commercial street district.
Right. But to do a dozen, and we can, I think, can we think about how to proceed, and then next meeting we will try to identify all 12 properties that we think should be done. And I'm fine with if we have to kind of embargo these applications for a number of months as they're prepared. It would be worth it in even January 2021, and we make news by approving 12 landmark applications at once, all city properties. It's that kind of action that we can take that I believe will change the culture around historic preservation, or help change it anyway. I like this idea. I gotta ask, Children's Museum, is it a thing? Is it ever open? I'd love to go. I've had so many people ask me.
I don't know that it's really open. That was the original firehouse.
Right.
The Children's
Right.
Museum. I've never been in it. I've been here 35 years and never been in it. I guess I can ask and find out how we get into that building.
Yeah, I mean, it is disingenuous to offer a children's museum and the signage and the promotion of it, and it is never open. I've never seen it open. I don't know, like yourself, Georgie, I've heard people live here their whole life and they don't know what it is or what it is. So
I've actually been in it, and it was open in 1998 when we first moved here.
Was it?
Yeah. Wasn't it also a jail? It was an early jailhouse. There's some jail structures in there, but I actually went in there. So we've had our children in there in 1998 or 2000, 20 years ago, but it's been closed for quite a while.
I'll find out about that. I was going to suggest that maybe for our next meeting, if everybody kind of picked out their top 10 or whatever, and then maybe we could get a list together, and then I will have to take it to the city and say, is it okay if we go ahead and landmark these, because they are the owners. But maybe we could have a list of what we want to start landmarking.
If the city does not want to landmark its properties, I will resign upon hearing that news, just so everybody knows. If they don't want to landmark something that they own, that we, the Historic Preservation Commission, recognize as historic, I really am not sure what tree we'd be barking up. The one glaring omission on this list, I have to mention, would fit every other building inside of it. And that's the Fox West Theater.
Oh, right. But it's not a city-owned property, right? Well, now it is.
It is a city-owned property.
Right, it's a city-owned property now, but that's a good idea. We'll put it on there. And
The city has a standing contract for the development of it and the fundraising and the renovation. The city is contracted with somebody else to do that, but the city owns it.
Right, and that golf course clubhouse is a rapid rap building which started the Santa Fe style, so that definitely has an interest for the historical preservation.
I'm not trying to say that they will say no. It's just that they have to sign the application. So I just want to get their
Sure.
approval prior to putting work into it. And then to answer a question that was earlier, I'm going to talk with them about, we originally had approval to landmark 10, the money to have 10 landmarked. So technically we still have 9 left. Because of COVID and all that budget thing, I'll see what money we have. I'm sure they're going to be willing to give us some money to get this started.
Well, and I think that we as the commission can set the goal, and if the funding for the professional preparation of the landmark applications isn't available to us through the city of Trinidad, it would be reasonable to ask community members to see if anybody would be willing to create and edit such a document. I know I'd be happy to.
Right.
You know, we don't need to pay somebody a couple grand to write the application for the Fox West Theater. I'm, again, happy to do that. So once we have a list of, you know, I'm fine with aiming for the stars and backfilling what we don't have funding for, but.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that's kind of a plan that everybody spend a little time looking at what their, you know, priority list is, and then we'll get, by the end of next meeting, we'll have a list order of what we want to do, and we'll take that to the city and say, this is what we propose to do.
Great idea.
If I could say something for a minute, there's 11 on that list that are pre-1930.
Nice.
So I think we should start there.
Add the Fox West Theater, and you've got your dozen.
Yep.
And I don't know why I'm just aiming for that number, but it's newsworthy. It's press release worthy. It's, you know, I would love it if KKTV came down with a TV camera and made a story for 5 minutes about that initiative right there, that we took 12 historic buildings owned by the city signed the documents, and we landmarked them. That would be super cool.
I agree, and I think just the exposure of us announcing it, that once people knew that we were doing it and the word got out, that we get a lot more community interest on people wanting to landmark their own.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And after all, next year is Santa Fe Trail Days.
And
200 years.
Prior to COVID, my thoughts were, as we landmarked the Carnegie Library, that we'd get the mayor to do, you know, a photo shoot presenting that plaque to the library, and each time that something was landmarked, we'd, you know, get a press release with that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, if we could do a bunch at once, that would be great too, because we haven't been able to arrange that with the COVID situation. So.
Well,
I know there's quite a few folks at the newspaper that really love the historical aspect of town as well, and always like the good publicity. So I bet we could easily get the newspaper involved as well.
Yeah, they would definitely come and photograph, you know, the mayor presenting the plaque and all that. So
Absolutely, and you know, maybe then we could even possibly get some of the local churches involved that have, you know, some of the great historic churches in town as well.
Right. Right, but you know, I think this is a great idea to do a number of them at once, and then if we could get some big city news down here, that would be great. I think that would be wonderful.
Hey, Shannon, I like your idea. The next phase, say we do this and there's a dozen, and that's awesome. Institutions. That is, I'm sure Trinidad State has something that needs landmarked, all of the churches, and any school, right? And that is, we're not really having to knock on doors or asking homeowners at this point to be a part of this process, but leading by example, showing that these institutions they trust got on board. You know, that would be super cool.
The hospital too, right?
Yeah, the hospital. There we go. Excellent. Well, we've got that for our next meeting. Any other thoughts on the city-owned properties list? Cool. Item 6, Chairman's Report. Very briefly, I encourage you all to like the Fox West Theater on Facebook. We have retained a web guru. Our virtual season will be emerging at the end of October. Again, the Fox West Theater is owned by the City of Trinidad and operated by the Fox West Theater Alliance, a 501c3. And this fall season is being brought to us by the RNI Foundation, the City of Trinidad Tourism Bureau, Urban Neighborhoods Incorporated, and you, or any corporate sponsor you want, email me, we can work it out. So that's super cool. That's all I have in my report. Commissioners' reports.
Well, I already gave mine, so anybody else can talk now.
Yeah. All right, hearing none, I shall move on to the Planning Administrator's report.
And I really don't have anything else tonight prepared. So, but I will check on the budget situation and preservation plan, and I'll check the period of significance for the district for you.
Awesome. Georgie, thank you so much. I appreciate all that.
Okay. You're very welcome, and that's all I have.
Excellent. Last call for any thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns. Shannon, I'm going to be in touch by the end of the week. I'm actually scripting out those videos.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Cool. Yeah, put it off till first week of October. Just so folks know, the fall season at the Fox West, it's not just musicians from the stage, but in fact some guided walkthrough videos and tours of spaces that you've never been. And the two hosts for those videos will be myself and Shannon. So thank you, Commissioner Rogan. Historic Commission. Yeah, the Historic Preservation Commission represents.
All right. We'll put those on the agenda. When can we see them? By October?
We're going to start releasing them at the end of October. And it's kind of wild because we've been recording musicians on the stage since mid-August. Up to and including the Trinidad Drum Circle and anybody passing through town. And we'll be all snowed in and still bored in our houses. And these videos are going to appear probably one a week through the end of the year.
Well, I can't wait to see them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, Chairman, I did have one other thing you reminded me of. Was anybody able to check out that survey on the city website for our...
Oh, my God, I forgot.
Oh, I did not. I'm sorry.
Oh,
If you could please spread the word about that. I haven't gotten any after those initial 6, I believe I got. So
I'll go do mine.
please check it out and then spread the word. If you do Facebook or Twitter or anything, please mention it, and hopefully we'll get some good responses.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's all I had, so thank you so much, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you all. I will entertain motions to adjourn if we're good.
Well, make sure you
So
put
moved.
Remington present, too. Remington.
Make sure what? I'm sorry.
We put Miss Remington as present because she was absent at first.
Ah, yes, yes.
You guys started ahead of time. You started before 5:30.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry.
I couldn't get on.
1 or 2 minutes. I apologize, but yes, you will be present for the meeting. So we had a motion, I believe.
Yep. Do I hear a second?
I will second the motion.
All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Folks, thank you so much. This was a great meeting. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Georgie, thank you.
Thank you.